Good afternoon and welcome to Disability Chat. In this session, Allison Bartlett, HDSA's resident disability expert, will talk about how to advocate for yourself. You can send a question at any time during the presentation. Just click on the chat function in the toolbar, type your question, and press send. This presentation will be available in about a week on HDSA's YouTube channel or by going to hdsa.org/disability chat. Allison will be offering 2 workshops during the HDSA convention, which will be live streamed on the HDSA website. On Saturday, June 11th at 10:45 a.m. Eastern Daylight Time, she'll be talking about dealing with HD while working, followed at 1:45 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time with a discussion on laying the groundwork for disability and beyond. If you're unable to join the live streaming segments, you'll be able to view the workshops online after the HDSA convention. And now a little about Allison. Allison is HDSA Senior Manager of Disability Programs and is a disability attorney who specializes in representing clients with rare chronic conditions like HD to navigate through the complex disability system. Allison holds a JD from the University of Cincinnati College of Law. And now I'll turn the chat over to Allison.
Thank you, Deb, and thank you everyone for joining me today. This is a very important topic, how to advocate for yourself, because as being part of the HD community, it's something that we have to do every day. So what I'm going to discuss today is why you need to advocate for yourself, how you advocate for yourself, your rights, and how to advocate with professionals. So first, why you need to advocate for yourself. It is your right to speak up about your condition, things that impact your well-being, and decisions being made on your behalf. You have the right to assert your own best interests. And this is important because no one else may be able to advocate for you. You know yourself and your needs best, and you will miss out on benefits and assistance for yourself if you do not speak up. You are your greatest tool. You are your own greatest advocate. You just have to take that first step to realize that you are the one who has to speak up for yourself. Because this is not something we talk a lot about in our society. A lot of times self-advocacy comes up because someone is in a situation where they now are in a position where they need help, where they have to advocate for themselves, but they may not have had the training on how to do it. So self-advocacy, what is self-advocacy? It is the ability to speak effectively on your own behalf. And you have to be able to do this in different contexts, like at work, school, within the community, even with friends and family, doctors, lawyers, and other professionals. So how do you advocate for yourself? Well, first, self-advocacy skills have to be learned and practiced. They're not just something you know how to do. It is something you have to work towards and put effort into every day. And first, you have to understand some things about yourself. You have to understand your values. So what are your values? What are the things that matter most to you? Then you need to understand your needs. What do I need to accomplish my tasks? What do I need to maintain my emotional, physical, and financial well-being? And rights. What are my rights and protections? And in order to advocate for your needs, you have to understand your rights. You also have to be aware of the support you need or the resources that are available to you, like different kinds of legal support, financial support, and medical support. If you know that you are going to have trouble advocating for yourself, you need to find someone you trust who can help you advocate on your behalf and who can communicate your needs. If you can't communicate your needs, then you need to appoint someone who can, like through a power of attorney document. And this is really important. Like an important part of advocating for yourself is creating a close network of people that you trust, who you can talk to about this, who you can discuss different ways to advocate, different needs, different ways to get your needs. It's good to have an open communication because that can make you aware of things you wouldn't be aware of otherwise. And having a safe place to share information like this is going to make you a more powerful advocate. So advocating for yourself. I have created a list of 10 steps for advocating for yourself. And to be clear, these steps are a guideline and a starting point. They may not work for everyone. You may have to figure out what works best for you. There are lots of different guides online for steps for advocating for yourself. They all say different things. And so, again, this is a starting point. And if you aren't happy with my 10, I'm sure you could do some research online and find some that work for you. But like I said, these are steps as a guideline and a starting point to at least start that conversation and thinking about how you're going to advocate for yourself. So, step number one, you have to believe in yourself. You are worth the effort it takes to advocate for yourself and protect your rights. If you do not believe in yourself, who else is going to? You have to start with you. Being a member of the HD community means you will get a lot of pushback and lack of understanding. There's not a lot of knowledge about HD. It's not well publicized, not a lot of people know what's going on. So do not let someone else's ignorance or lack of compassion stand in the way of getting what you need and deserve. And we know this is something that comes up a lot in the HD community. There is a lot of lack of understanding. And so education is also a huge part of advocating for yourself. And understanding that some days are just going to be hard. And that's okay. That's one of the things that's going to happen. But if you know what your worth is, if you believe in yourself, and if you know what you deserve, that's going to help you get through those harder days. Number two, know and prioritize your needs. You have specific needs. Everyone's needs are different. We could, like the list of needs for the community as a whole, we could simplify, but HD is different for every single person. It's different in every family. So when you get down to it, your needs are unique to you. You need to understand your unique needs. No one else can help make sure your needs are met if you do not know what they are. You need to write down a list of your needs. And this is a list that should continue to evolve and change. As old needs are met and new needs develop, you need to understand that this is happening. So your list of needs to really be a living document. It needs to be something that you know is going to change over time, especially with a progressive disease. The needs that you have when if you just get the needs that you have before, like, say, starting the genetic testing process are going to be different than the needs that you have if you do have HD and you are in late stage HD. So knowing that your needs are going to change over time is a really important part of this process. And that's good to be aware of because there are things like there are needs you can prioritize as a whole, like needs for the community, like getting the HD Parity Act passed. But then there are each individual person's needs that follow that shift as they go through their own HD journey. So what are your needs in this moment and what are your possible needs as things continue to progress? And it's okay to think about future needs, but don't forget about your needs of today. Know your rights. This is a really important part of advocating for yourself. First, your fundamental right to know and understand your rights. You have legal rights, medical rights, and employment rights, among others. You are entitled to equal rights under the law. And one big thing is you have the right to receive information in your primary language. This includes receiving things in Braille if you are blind and having an ASL interpreter if you are deaf. Keep records. Keeping accurate records is essential for advocating for yourself. It'll help show your need for accommodations and services like work accommodations, assistive devices, disability benefits, and other government benefits and assistance. Written records are also the best way to show if your rights have been violated. And keeping records is also going to be really important for you to track your needs, what needs have been met, what needs you're working on, and how things are going to change over time. And keeping records are going to help you better advocate for yourself because instead of having to go look for what you need, if it's all written down, you have it there in front of you. And I recommend writing down what you need whenever you're going to have an important conversation because it helps remember what you want to talk about. You get across all your key points and you make sure you talk about everything you want to talk about in that moment. Because as humans, whether you have HD or not, sometimes we forget or we get sidetracked or we just can't remember everything in that moment. So if you have everything written down, it's going to be a lot better for advocating for yourself and keeping track of everything that has happened up to that point. Get the facts. To best advocate for yourself, you have to know what you're talking about or asking for. Speak with experts in the topic area, like your physician, or if you have disability questions, myself, or if you have questions about the NYA with someone like Marianne. Knowing who you need to speak to or asking the questions to figure out who the expert is in the topic area, that's really helpful. And doing your own research using legitimate sources. So, a legitimate source is something like the HDSA website. Facebook can be a really helpful tool for finding interactions and connections, but Facebook information, if you only rely on information from support groups like on Facebook, it's not always 100% accurate or up to date. And so, like I said, it's a good tool like to find human connection and interaction and like get background for how other people have experienced things, but that doesn't mean it's the fact at face value. You want to use something like Google as a starting place. And Google can be really helpful, but it can also lead you astray. One thing that's really important to know about Google searches, all of the searches at the top, like usually the top 3 to 5 things, are ads. Don't click on the ads. Those are targeted towards you and they may not be the information that you're actually looking for. With disability rights and things, disability rights organization. If you have questions about your rights, your disability rights in the state, Disability Rights is a great organization. And you can look up Disability Rights Virginia, Disability Rights New York, Disability Rights California. Every state has one. If you have questions about the Americans with Disabilities Act or the ADA, go to ada.gov. If you have questions for the Equal Employment Commission, go to eeoc.gov. If you have questions about Social Security, and I know this stuff is not always written in language that's easy to understand, which is why it's a good starting point. But like go to places like socialsecurity.gov. It is really important to understand the sources that you are using so you can verify the accuracy of the information. There's a lot of incorrect information out there. That is why I have a job as the senior manager of disability programs, because I help simplify what that information is. Um, but that is why it's a good thing to use these as a starting place and to kind of understand what you're looking for. And sometimes it's okay to just type things in Google to see where it gets you, because sometimes that'll get you to the question you need to ask. I know there have been plenty of times when I'm doing research, because I don't know everything, where I type something in Google knowing that I'm not going to get the exact answer that I'm looking for, but that it'll lead me to keywords and information that'll get me to where I'm going. Sometimes you have to do 3, 4, or 5 searches to find exactly what you need to find. Don't stop looking for that information. Advocating for yourself includes looking for that information and getting the facts. Prepare and plan. Creating a plan in advance will help you ask the right questions and discuss all of your needs in the moment. Making sure you write down symptoms to discuss with your doctor or anything that's changed in your condition, writing down questions for a lawyer, writing down needed accommodations for your employer. You can get outside help during the preparation and planning process, and that can be advised. Sometimes it's like if you're not an expert in the field, which you likely are not, you need outside help to figure out what questions to ask or what you need to prepare for. But that's why preparing and planning in advance really helps before you have these conversations. It'll give you the power to know what you can ask, what you deserve, and what pushback you need to give if you get pushback in a situation. You need to express yourself clearly. Be brief and stick to the point. Do not provide unimportant or unnecessary details. And while this sounds callous and harsh, this comes up a lot because when talking about certain things, people provide of a lot of emotional information. And while as humans, that's easy to do because things are hard or unfair or difficult, emotional information doesn't actually help when you're advocating for yourself in a lot of circumstances, if there is not a clear point within the emotional aspect of the story. Again, that is why it's helpful to prepare and plan in advance so you make sure the most important facts are getting out. An example of this is if you've ever participated in the Hill Day when advocating for the HD Parity Act. Families need to tell some aspect of their HD story, but at the end of the story, they have to ask. They have to make a clear, why is this necessary? Why does why does the 2-year waiting period for Medicare hurt HD families? And if you don't make that connection clear, it's really hard for someone to care about what's going on or why the 2-year waiting period needs to be waived. State your concern and how you want things changed. Be assertive, not aggressive. This is really an important sticking point because being assertive is often confused with being aggressive, but assertiveness is necessary for advocacy. A lot of people are concerned that I'm being too aggressive. I can't ask. I can't keep pushing. Yes, you can. Being aggressive is demanding for something that's not a guaranteed right, maybe being mean about it. Being assertive is demanding something you know to be true, you know you deserve, and you're getting pushback on. And it's okay to be assertive. It's okay to make multiple phone calls. It's okay to follow up. It's okay to say, no, you're incorrect in this situation. This is what the law states. This is what I demand. This is what I deserve. Please get me in contact with somebody who can help me if you are not able to. It is very important to be assertive. Sometimes you may need to be a little bit aggressive when you're being assertive, especially with advocacy, but it's like being assertive and being aggressive are two different things, and it is 100% necessary to be assertive when you are advocating for yourself. Do not be afraid to be assertive. It is your life. They are your rights. You have every right to be an active participant in this process and to demand what you deserve. Get information and decisions in writing. This is so important. Gathering information and evidence for your case is critical for your case and for advocating for yourself. Keep track of all documents and decisions. You should keep everything that you get in writing. Get everything in writing. And the reason you want to do this is it allows you to track decision processes. It's proof of communication and decisions made, and it's necessary if you need to appeal a decision. This is really important getting accommodations from your employer. This is really important getting medical care from your doctor. This is really important when applying for Social Security disability or applying for disability from your short-term disability provider or your long-term disability provider. You want to keep track of all of this to make sure that you are correctly awarded benefits, that you're correctly paid out on your benefits, that you're getting everything that you're supposed to. And if you need help keeping track of all this information, ask for help in this process. Right to appeal. You have a fundamental right to appeal a decision. You have the right to challenge an unfavorable decision. You have a right to ask for clear written information about the appeal process. You have the right to understand the appeal process and the appeal timeline. And you are responsible for staying within the appeal timeline. And what that means is, I know for Social Security disability, you have 60 days to appeal the decision. It is ultimately your responsibility to make sure your appeal is filed within that 60 days or to obtain representation within that 60-day period. And 10, be firm and persistent. Do not give up. You will get pushback. You will be told no. But just because you are told no does not mean you are wrong. Follow through on your wants and needs. Follow through on your action steps and your responsibilities. Have a checklist. Make sure you check off all those boxes. I didn't include it on here and I should have. Ask for help if you need it. One big part of advocating for yourself is asking for help when you need help. And that's also getting help can make sure you are firm and persistent. Don't take no for an answer. This is not in the same realm necessarily, but for me, I was persistent when it came to getting into law school. I got waitlisted at the University of Cincinnati College of Law, and I called and emailed regularly. I made sure to let them know that I was interested, that I wanted to go to their university, and because I was very persistent and very clear about what I wanted, I was ultimately accepted. And now I'm the lawyer that I am today. And that's one of those things that I had learned because there was something else that I hadn't been persistent enough about. I hadn't made clear that I wanted. And so it was an opportunity that I missed, and I wasn't going to do that again. And so it's important to advocate for yourself in all aspects to make sure what you want is clear and that you're letting the people know who you need to be in contact with, that it's something that you want, that it's something that you are very passionate about, you're going to keep working towards so that they know that you care and that you're not going to give up and be persuaded otherwise. So now that we've talked about 10 steps for advocating for yourself, what are your rights? So legal rights are outlined in the American with Disabilities Act. It's also There are a lot of places in federal law that outline rights for genetic discrimination, for disabilities, for all kinds of things. You have medical rights. These are defined in a lot of different ways, but a good overview place is the American Medical Association. They have outlined guidelines for how patients should be treated. And then for employment rights, those are in the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission. They are also outlined by federal law. So to go into more detail, the Americans with Disabilities Act prevents discrimination against people with disabilities in the areas of employment, state and local government services, public transit, businesses that are open to the public, and telecommunications. It's also provided under federal law through things like the 14th Amendment and federal court decisions. Me being a lawyer, I did too much research and looked up really important disability cases under federal court decisions and was like, that's not necessary for the presentation today, but it's hard to turn off being a lawyer. But there are a lot of federal court cases that have helped guarantee that individuals with a disability or disabling condition are guaranteed all of their rights in the United States. And then just to stress, disability rights are human rights. And so any issues that you face because of a disabling condition like Huntington's disease, you are guaranteed rights under human rights because you are a person and everyone deserves to be treated equally. Medical rights. So again, like I mentioned, the American Medical Association, there's a code of medical ethics. Physicians can best contribute to a mutually respectful alliance with patients by serving as their patients' advocates and by respecting patients' rights. So some of the things that are governed by the Code of Ethics or laid out in the Code of Medical Ethics for how patients should be treated include patient rights include to courtesy, respect, dignity, and timely responsive attention to his or her needs, the right to ask questions about their health status or recommended treatment when they do not fully understand what has been described and to have their questions answered, to make decisions about the care the physician recommends and to have those decisions respected. A patient who has decision-making capacity may accept or refuse any recommended medical intervention. Patients have the right to have the physician and any other staff respect the patient's privacy and confidentiality, and patients have the right to obtain a second opinion. Hospitals and healthcare systems also usually have patient rights to make decisions about medical treatment, and they indicate what your rights are. Most hospitals and healthcare systems have a list of your rights written out. And again, patient rights are a subset of human rights. You have rights with your medical provider. Do not be afraid to speak up. Employment rights are protected by the Americans with Disabilities Act and the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission. So under employment, employers must provide people with disabilities an equal opportunity to benefit from the employment-related opportunities available to others. This includes things like recruitment, hiring, promotions, training, pay, and social activities. The law also requires that an employer provide reasonable accommodation to an employee or job applicant with a disability, unless doing so would cause significant difficulty or expense for the employer. This is called undue hardship. The only thing that stinks about this definition is the reasonable accommodation standard has not been defined and it is up to interpretation. So if you need accommodations as a result of your Huntington's disease, your employer gets to decide if their accommodation is reasonable or not. If there's any question, then you can fight that decision. So now we've talked about a little bit about what rights exist. I'm going to talk about advocating with different professionals. Advocating with lawyers. So first, it's important to know your rights. You have the right to decide how to proceed with your case. Your attorney's job is to present options to you and what those options include. So what kind of outcome might be expected. It is important to know your attorney can fire you if you want to pursue a questionable course of action. They can have you sign a document that holds them, that waives all liability if you decide to pursue a course of action that they do not recommend. That being said, just so you know, like there are limits. If you want to do something outlandish and kind of crazy that a lawyer knows is not going to work, the lawyer can't be held accountable in that situation. But what is really, really important, you have the right to fire your attorney. If the attorney is not listening to your wants or needs, not recognizing or working with HD if that is relevant to your case, or not responding in a timely fashion. There are a couple professions in our society, like lawyers and doctors, that demand a certain level of respect, and people kind of unquestioningly go along with what people in these professions say. You always have a right to question. And if you are not questioning some of these decisions, if you're not questioning the treatment that you're receiving, then you are not properly advocating for yourself. So if you have reached out to your attorney numerous times, they've never called back, you don't feel like they're listening to you or they understand your case at all, you have the right to find a new attorney. Uh, it's also really important that if you're working with a lawyer for whatever reason, you need to disclose your HD if your HD is relevant at that point. If it has started to impact you, and if it's either the reason or, and especially if it's the reason that you've needed to reach out to an attorney. Disclosing your HD is especially important if you have been convicted of a crime. HD can be a mitigating factor in guilt and sentencing if cognitive difficulties led to the decision-making process that landed the person in jail. And HD symptoms and limitations often impact the decisions that lead to the crime. So it's so important that if you or your family, like, that you advocate for yourself on this, or if you advocate on behalf of a family member. You have to be open and honest with your lawyer to get the best representation and assistance possible. If you are not open and honest with your lawyer, they are not presenting you accurate case options. They're not doing their best they can to represent you because they don't have all the information. And having HD brings along a unique set of needs when it comes to working with an attorney. So some of these include, you may have to waive confidentiality to allow a friend or family member to help with the legal process. If you are cognitively impaired as a result of your Huntington's disease, you are going to need assistance with the decision-making process, with how your case unfolds, with providing information to your lawyer, with making sure forms and other things are filled out. So the lawyer should be given permission to speak with someone who can assist with the case. A person with HD is likely going to need a lot more assistance navigating the legal process, and they need an attorney that will be supportive and understanding. This actually comes up a lot when it comes to divorce. There's a lot of acrimonious divorce lawyers out there, and so that means they want to take the other spouse for everything that they're worth. And a lot of times that's not what HD families are looking for. They're looking for compassion. They're looking for a mediator. So you have to know what you're looking for so you can ask for it. Again, be very prepared. And so that leads me to my next point, be prepared to ask questions. How quickly do you return calls or emails? How do you prioritize cases? Have you worked with someone with a neurodegenerative disability before? I get asked a lot if I know any HD specific lawyers or lawyers who work with HD families in terms of divorce or wills and trusts and estates or things like that. And there aren't many attorneys out, like there aren't attorneys out there who just specialize in representing HD families through these legal processes. But there are aspects of HD that share similarities with other neurodegenerative diseases like Parkinson's and ALS and Alzheimer's. So you wouldn't want to look for an HD specific attorney, but look for an attorney who's worked with other neurodegenerative diseases because they are going to have some experience and they're likely going to be more compassionate and understanding. And then ask if they're willing to learn about the HD. Ask if they're willing to listen to you or get information from somebody else in the field, uh, like myself. Like working with like always, they're always willing. Another attorney is always welcome to reach out to me. Um, and as you're going through all of this, you may need to interview multiple lawyers before making a decision, and that is your right. You do not have to hire the first attorney that you meet with. You are hiring the attorney. The attorney works for you. It's not the other way around. They are assisting you through their legal process. And so you need to demand what you want to get out of this. You have to be very clear. What do you want to get out of the legal representation? Why do you need the lawyer? What are your needs and how can they be met? And you need to make sure those things are communicated effectively with your lawyer so you are represented the best that you can. And There are a lot of wonderful attorneys out there. You are going to find good representation, but you have to be clear about what your needs are when going into the process. And you have to know what you are willing to put up with. So if you do end up being unhappy with your representation, you need to go find other representation. And I'm not saying that's going to happen all the time, but I just want you to know that if you are not happy, you have the right to find a new attorney. Advocating with Social Security. Things to know. This is very important. Social Security gets thousands of phone calls every day from people about all kinds of topics. You have to be incredibly specific about what you need. To be 100% honest, Social Security gets a lot of phone calls from elderly individuals who cannot use the online resources, who may not really need to call in to ask a question, but don't understand how to get that information otherwise. And so that's why Social Security can be testy sometimes. That's why there's so much like, please use our online resources, because they get a lot of phone calls from people who really they're using the resource because they don't know how to use the other resources that would be easier for them. But that's so don't take it personally if Social Security is grumpy that day or if they're being short with you. They speak with a lot of people. Do they need better people skills? Some of them probably, but just kind of accept that they deal with a lot. They get a lot of phone calls, they get a lot of information. They talk to a lot of people who have no idea what they're asking and what they have no idea what they really need. And so they deserve a little compassion too. But that's why when you do get your phone call answered, you need to be very clear and you need to have prepared in front of you exactly what you want to know and exactly what you're asking to make it easier for you and for them. Social Security exists to help you. It is their job to process your claim or your request, but that is not the same thing as having a personal interest in your claim. Only you have a personal interest in the outcome of your claim. This means that you have to speak up. It is your job to care and make sure Social Security gets everything they need to process your case or any other issue you are dealing with. You need to know who to call. Always call your local field office if you can. The national, like the 1-800 national number, always has a long wait time and can only provide general information. If you're trying to apply for disability, calling the national number is not going to help you. They cannot schedule an appointment to complete an application, and they cannot provide details about a pending application. Only your local field office can provide that information. If you have a disability claim pending, you're going to need to call Disability Determination Services instead of your local field office because that's where your claim gets transferred in order to make a medical determination. So, again, as we've talked about earlier, one of the many steps of advocating for yourself is having the right information and knowing who to talk to. You want to be clear and concise. Like I said, write out what you want to ask or discuss before you call. The person who answers the general phone line is usually a different person from your case representative, so they don't know what's going on in your case. Have your social security number ready, your name, the other identifying information, and your question. Do not provide unnecessary or confusing information. This makes it harder for SSA to do their job. This can lead to agitation, and it means you're not going to get the answer that you want. Get help calling if you have trouble talking on the phone or communicating what you need communicated. You have the right to ask for a supervisor if Social Security is being rude or uncooperative, if the person on the phone is wrong. This is an especially big issue for HD and compassionate allowance. If you have not gotten a call back from your claim representative ever, or if your claim is taking longer than average to process, you have the right to ask for a supervisor. Do not be afraid to ask for a supervisor. The rules and regulations, like the Social Security rules and regulations, are overwhelming. If you end up having somebody that you're talking to who hasn't worked there very long, they're not going to know as much as a supervisor who's probably been there 15 or more years. It's okay to ask for a supervisor. Often supervisors are really helpful and understanding. And if you get to that point, like don't be afraid to ask for that assistance. Ask to speak to somebody who knows what's going on. That's important. Like that's a big part of advocating for yourself. Asking for what you need in the moment that you need it. Do not be afraid to ask for a supervisor, especially when it comes to working with Social Security. And do not be afraid to push back if Social Security is wrong or they're very rude. Some offices will have a variety of different people answering phones. So if the person who answers the phone is especially rude and you ask for a supervisor and for any reason they say no, then hang up and call back. Some offices are small and that rude person is the only person who answers the phone, so you're gonna have to make the best to deal with that person. And I know it can be really difficult in the moment to try to stay calm and not get agitated, but that is going to be the best thing. That is why it's so important to have everything written down in advance or know exactly what you're going to say. So if the person is being rude or difficult, then you know what you need to say, what you need to ask for, and what you deserve so you can push back. And again, there's a difference between being assertive and being angry and aggressive. It is 100% okay and necessary to be assertive with Social Security. Do not be afraid to be assertive with Social Security. Do not be afraid to hold Social Security accountable for your disability claim. Continue to communicate with Social Security while your claim is pending. Ensure that all medical records are received by Social Security. Ensure that Social Security receives all evidence that you have submitted, including letters of support and any additional forms. And ask questions if it is not clear to you why Social Security needs something. Do not be afraid to ask questions. If you ask specific, pointed questions, they are going to be happy to answer them because if it ultimately means you're helping get your claim processed faster, it means that is one fewer claim that they have to deal with. And know your rights. You have the right to request that you are seen by your doctors if Social Security needs to schedule an exam. You have a right to receive a copy of your claim, your disability claim, and you have the right to appeal a denial. Advocating with medical providers. And the reason I say medical providers is because there's a lot of different medical providers. This includes like a licensed clinical social worker who is your therapist. This includes physical therapy, occupational therapy, a registered nurse, a neurologist, your primary care physician, uh, an oncologist, a rheumatologist. It includes everybody. So it's not just a doctor, it's anyone who provides some level of medical care. So it's important to know your rights. You have the right to be treated with courtesy, respect, and dignity, as I said before. I also said that most major hospital systems and healthcare providers outline patient rights and responsibilities. Um, so you can look that up online if you have any questions. You have the right to ask questions and have your questions answered. And like I talked to before, being a medical provider in this country usually comes with a certain level of respect, and a lot of people don't necessarily question what doctors are telling them. It is okay to question. Do not listen to a medical professional just because they are a medical professional. People make mistakes. You have the right to question their diagnosis, their treatment plan, and the way they treat you if you are not happy with your care. For example, a primary care physician who does genetic tests and says there is no care they can provide because you are gene positive. That is not accurate. There is no cure, but that doesn't mean there is no treatment that can be provided that can help with symptoms, managing symptoms, and making sure you live the best day-to-day life. Or seeing a neurologist who only treats the movement aspect of HD because that's only treating a third of the disease, or any doctor that is dismissive of your needs. If you've gone to them and you've complained of pain and they've never addressed your pain, or this happens a lot, they chalk it up to you being overweight and they don't listen to anything else you have to say. Like if a physician is being dismissive, one thing you can say is, I want you to put in my medical records that you dismissed this and took no action, um, to make it clear that whatever you need to have taken care of was not taken care of. And you have the right to get a new doctor. I am not saying that this happens all the time because it doesn't. But if you feel you are not given the level of care that you need or deserve, or you have questions, or you feel something's being missed or left out, you have the right to get a second opinion. You have the right to question. You have the right to demand that you be treated um, better. You have the right to find, and like I say this, and this is hard because I know there are people who live in certain areas who don't always have access to everything. I know that the HDSA Centers of Excellence, there are across the country, but that doesn't mean everyone has access to them. And so if you're in that kind of situation, there are instances where you maybe have two neurologists. You maybe go see a center of excellence maybe once a year, but then you find a local neurologist who can help manage your care. Like there are different options. And I know not everybody has access to everything, but it's important to know your rights. It is important to know that if you are not happy with your medical provider, that they do not have to stay your medical provider. And it is okay to ask questions. It is your right to ask questions and have your questions answered. If you are getting dismissed, that is not okay. It is really important that you do disclose your needs. Your doctor cannot provide full care of everything that's going on if you are not open and honest. It is important for you to understand basics of your condition, like common symptoms of HD, so you can make sure you are getting care for all aspects of your condition. Like I said, HD is physical, behavioral, and cognitive, and those symptoms appear in different ways. So it's really important to know, have some kind of expectation of what are some of the things that you can experience so you know that you're getting care in all of those areas. If you are unhappy with your treatment plan, speak up. If your doctor is pushing for a procedure that you do not want, speak up. As I stated before, you do not have to get a procedure done if you do not want to. You have to understand the risks and the ramifications. You have to understand the consequences of what that may mean. But if you ultimately do not want something to happen, you don't have to agree to it. Um, it's important to let the doctor know, your medical providers know if you're applying for Social Security. You have to tell them in advance so they can help you prepare. Medical providers do not specialize in Social Security, and they often do not understand the requirements. So letting them know in advance means they can work with you, they can help get stuff in your record that may not be there otherwise. A lot of physicians, especially Center of Excellence neurologists, want to include more details in your medical records than they would otherwise if they know you're going to apply for disability. Because medical providers are taking medical record notes most often for their own purposes, to track your care and to make sure things are paid for by the insurance company. So the way they notate medical records is not exactly what Social Security is looking for, because Social Security needs a lot more, which is why you have to tell your medical providers in advance if you're going to apply, when you're going to apply, and that you need help with that process. And your medical provider cannot help you if you do not ask. They cannot read your mind. They do not know everything that is going on. They can provide options based on what they know, but they're not going to suggest things based on hypotheticals. They're only going to suggest things based on the information they have. So if you haven't given them all of the information, then you're not properly advocating for yourself. And another important thing to do when advocating with medical providers is to get copies of your medical records. Ask questions if you do not understand what is in your record or if you do not understand what something means. Hold your medical provider accountable if your medical records are not well documented. And the reason for this is poorly documented medical records is often the reason for a disability denial. I have seen it over and over and over again. And again, that's not because the medical provider is providing poor care. It's because what they're putting in the medical records is for their record and to make sure the insurance company pays for something, which is very different from what Social Security is looking for, which is why it's important, if you're not sure, if you've never had that conversation, it can be beneficial to look at things. The caveat with that is sometimes it's harder to get medical records if you have HD, depending on your symptoms and what's going on, because medical providers don't want to release everything if it could be triggering or emotionally harmful. And so that's another question to ask. And that's really helpful if you have a social worker, to work with the social worker in your provider's office to at least ask those questions. Like if you don't want to know everything that's in your medical record, you can always have a conversation with your doctor about it or your social worker to at least get an idea and to make sure everything is being well documented without having to read everything specifically. But if you want to know what's in your medical record file, then you should request your records and look through it. And make sure to follow up on medical record requests if you have not received the records within 2 weeks. Medical record processing facilities are often really huge and things can get misplaced or things can get backlogged. So it's good to follow up on that as well. Advocating with your employer. This is really important because this is an area where a lot of HD individuals are going to end up needing to advocate for themselves. Like you're going to need to advocate for yourself in all areas, but this comes up a lot because a lot of individuals with HD end up benefiting from accommodations before they have to stop working. First, know your rights. It is illegal for an employer to ask about your genetic information. It is illegal for an employer to discriminate against you because of your genetic information or use the information to make employment decisions. It is illegal for your employer to read your Facebook page with the purpose of finding genetic information or any other social media. You are legally allowed to ask for accommodations once you start to experience symptoms and limitations from HD. In this case, only having genetic diagnosis of HD with no symptoms or limitations is not enough for accommodations because you should have no limitations or impacts at that point. But accommodations should be provided as long as they are deemed reasonable. So one thing that's really going to be important if you need accommodations from your employer is determining what accommodations you need. And this is important because if you know what accommodations you need up front, it's going to be easier to ask for them. So accommodations are based on your ability to do your job. So what are the essential tasks of your job? Think about the tasks you perform every day. And these things should be in your job description. If you don't have your job description, ask for it. And this should be helpful in creating a cheat sheet for figuring out what things you may be able to change or accommodate. What will make it easier to perform your essential job tasks? Do you need more time to complete tasks? Do you need more breaks during the day? Do you need fewer job tasks? Can you rearrange things? And create a list of accommodations for yourself. Like I said, you're more likely to get accommodations approved if you already know what you need, and you don't want to depend on someone else to tell you what you need. You know what you need, so you have to ask for it. Know who to speak to about accommodations. If you have a human resources department, you are going to need to speak with HR. They will need to have a written record of your need for accommodations and what accommodations have been provided. You're also going to need to speak to your supervisor. Your supervisor generally plays a role in determining what accommodations are appropriate and how to implement the accommodations. Who to go to first depends on your relationship. If you have a really good relationship with your supervisor and they're really understanding, you're going to want to go to your supervisor first. If you don't have the best relationship with your supervisor and you're not sure how they're going to react, then it's best to go to human resources first. You need to provide documentation. You will need medical support for your accommodations. You don't have to disclose that you have HD, but you will need to disclose enough to show that you need accommodations, and you're likely going to need a letter of support from a doctor. You're going to have to show why the accommodations are necessary. And what to do if your accommodations are violated. If it's something like like if you have the accommodations and they're interfered with like by a supervisor or coworker, go to HR if you have one. Record everything in writing, send an email, keep notes on everything. If your rights are violated by the entire employer or organization, or your employment is wrongfully terminated, then you're going to need to contact the EEOC. You have 180 days to file a claim. I provided the website to learn more about how to file a claim. It's going to be the most helpful to hire an EEOC lawyer as soon as possible. I cannot provide recommendations. I do not know EEOC lawyers, so a good starting place is Google. And this can help you find at least what law firms are in your area, and then you can do research and figure out who is going to be the right attorney for you. And as we know all too well, advocating with law enforcement is really important for the HD community. So first, know your rights. Public entities like state and local law enforcement, like the Chicago Police Department or the NYPD, they must comply with the ADA and are required to provide reasonable accommodations to people with disabilities. Law enforcement must provide reasonable accommodations when they arrest individuals with disabilities, and if you need an accommodation because of a disability, you need to let them know. While these are your rights, we know that these are not always enforced. And so that's why it's important to communicate them and make sure those needs are communicated, because if for any reason they are not adhered to, then if necessary, you can hire an attorney to fight what has happened. And it also is going to be really important to communicate your HD status, because that should change the way that they interact with you. Most people are not familiar with HD, so assume they do not know what it is. It is really important to carry an HD explanation card. Make sure your HD status is included in the police report if you get arrested, because it could be necessary for understanding what happened, for getting charges dismissed, for helping navigate the legal system. And so you want to make sure that it is documented. Continue to communicate your HD status with every communication with law enforcement to make sure that it is stressed and that is understood, as you move forward, and to make them aware that you need accommodations, especially if at that point that you do need accommodations. If there are behavioral outbursts or if there are cognitive issues understanding what is going on, that needs to be communicated. Family communication with law enforcement. This is important, especially with HD families, because sometimes you cannot avoid calling for assistance in an escalated situation. And if that is a possibility, a family needs to have a plan in place so they know what to say, what needs to be communicated, what advice and warnings to give if law enforcement has to come to the home or first responders. And the family needs to be clear with phone operators and phone responders about what to expect and how to react with the HD individual and how the HD individual may react to that situation. And another way to advocate with law enforcement is to educate local law enforcement. HDSA does have a law enforcement training guide, which you can take to your local law enforcement and police department and see if they're willing to learn and be open to helping the HD community. And this is just a reminder that your needs matter. You have to advocate for yourself. And I know that it's hard. It is going to take practice every day. And some days it's too hard. It's okay. It's okay to take a step back for a day, but ultimately you're the only one who can advocate for yourself, and you have to push forward and demand your rights and your needs. Are there any questions?
Thank you, Allison. That was a really comprehensive presentation on advocacy in many different areas. We do have just a few minutes left. A reminder, you can send questions in through the chat box. You can find that at the bottom of your toolbar. Just go into chat, type your question, and press send. So we don't seem to have any questions, but in a couple of minutes, Allison, you were talking about the importance of advocating for yourself, and obviously the family gets involved in advocating. Can you talk a little bit about how you can designate the various members of your family to advocate or talk on your behalf in different circumstances, and what's needed to really formalize that process?
Thanks, Deb. That's a great question. So there are two areas really where you can designate individuals to make decisions on your behalf. The easiest way to do this is a power of attorney. You can either have like a legal financial power of attorney or a medical power of attorney. Really, you should have both. A legal financial power of attorney, that will allow somebody to help advocate for you. So what a power of attorney does, it doesn't give someone the decision to make it doesn't give someone the right to make decisions for you. It just gives like a family member, like a spouse, a sibling, the right to communicate your decisions. Because a power of attorney kind of dictates, like, so if I'm the one with HD and my husband is my power of attorney, you can set aside in that document what decisions that I want to have made, and my husband will just help me communicate them. And so you want to make sure when you create a power of attorney, it's somebody you trust, it's somebody who knows what you want and you need, so they can communicate those decisions for you. You don't lose the right to make decisions unless you are deemed mentally incapacitated, and only a physician can make that determination. So a power of attorney will allow someone to just help communicate the decisions that you want. And a medical power of attorney will allow a family member to communicate your medical decisions to your medical providers.
We do have a question from our audience. How do we create an explanation card?
Oh, so I should have provided a link to it, but there are HD explanation cards on our website. That is a resource you can find on HDSA. Do you know exactly where that is on the website, Deb?
No, we'd have to look it up. I'm sorry.
It's okay. But there are HD explanation cards on the website. That is a resource you have access to. I think it's actually under the publication section because you can download a whole law enforcement kit. And I know that family members can get this explanation card as part of the law enforcement kit. And the link has been included in the chat if anybody would like that.
Okay, that's what I was trying to do, is to go quickly to hdsa.org to find our link. All right. Well, we are just about out of time. I don't see any other questions coming in. I want to thank Allison for her presentation today and remind everyone that Allison will be providing 2 sessions during the HDSA convention. Both of them are on Saturday. One begins at 10:45 a.m. and the other begins at 1:30 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time. Both of them are on disability. The first one is on dealing with HD while working. That begins at 10:45, and the second one is laying the groundwork for disability and beyond. So please do register for the virtual part of the convention on the hdsa.org website. It's entirely free, and you can listen to Allison's presentations. But if you're unable to join us on Saturday, June 11th, then these presentations that she's making will be available after the convention. So thank you everyone for joining us today, and have a great day.